Alright, so welcome everyone. This is Disgruntled Elk, and I'm doing a replay commentary of my showcase playing this weekend. It was I want to say the 8th, 8th or 9th yesterday. But I played Death and Taxes Yorion, pretty stock. We have Ports, Waste, Caracas, Plains, but there's something off about the list. Yeah, so we decided to play 4 Urza Sagas because, why not just play the best card out of Modern Horizons 2 and 1 Retrofitter Foundry to play along with that. I made the decision for a couple reasons. One, I know Field of Ruin primarily was in there just because it's 2 extra lands that sometimes blow up a land, sometimes mana screw your opponent. I was finding it was really medium to bad, and so instead I was like, all right, well, 2 Field of Ruin, let's trim those. Let's play 2 Urza Sagas. And I tried it, and it seemed actually quite good. And I was like, all right, well, let's just play 4, and then also play a Retrofitter Foundry. So I cut the Sword of Fire and Ice for the Retrofitter Foundry because Sword was kind of already the weakest equipment you had, and so replacing that with a tutor target for the Saga alongside a late Aether Vial seemed totally reasonable. The other reason was because we're up to 35 lands, which seems like a lot, but I felt like the games I was losing, other than to, incredibly fast combo decks, which Field of Ruin's probably not going to help against anyway, was when I just didn't draw lands, right? Or, like when I didn't draw enough lands. And so I always want to hit like land 3, 4, 5. But Urza Saga doubles as a way to just generate a ton of value in the mid game, and then late game, you just start like making guys, and then the Retrofitter Foundry, when you have 7+ lands, is just like, all right, make 2 guys a turn, one of which is a flyer, one's a ground creature, and then you start making a 4/4. It really, I was really intrigued to try it out because why not? And we'll kind of see how that goes. Everything else is pretty stock, but what I cut. So we already talked about the Retrofitter Foundry, but what I cut for the other 2 Urza Sagas were the Giver of Runes and the Recruiter, or not the Recruiter, the Charming Prince / Palace Jailer effect. So now the deck is really clean. It's literally everything is a 4 of. Everything. Thalia, Stoneforge, Spirit. Everything is a 4 of, except for exactly these 5 cards. It has felt super clean, very nice. Also, writing your deck list is shorter, so that's pretty cool. Sideboard, pretty standard. I still like the 4 Deafening Silence, 2 Mind Break Traps. I'm on the Peacekeeper because it's probably better than Kataki in the version that's playing Retrofitter Foundry, so that's what we're doing. And then Cage, which, fun fact, your Urza Sagas can go get Cage as well. So if you bring it in, you actually have 5 copies. I think going forward, I probably want 1 other bullet, maybe a Pithing Needle. Seems pretty good as well. But yeah, so that's where my head was at going into it. Having the Retrofitter Foundry Urza Saga engine is also very good in the mirror match. And so I felt slightly favored in the mirror, which usually there's not a whole lot you can do about that. But yeah, so I'm not going to spoil my record, but I will go ahead and give you a heads up that there were some misplays, some click-throughs, that definitely, some of them came back to bite me, some of them didn't, and we will just have to figure out which those were together. I will see you in round 1. Okay, so we are back for round 1. The other advantage to doing the post commentary is that I can actually just pause it when I need to. I can skip through dead air because there will be some in these long drawn out games. Yeah, so we're going into round 1. It's 210 players, so just short by 3 players of 9 rounds. So it's only going to be 8, which means you effectively have to 7-1 the event to top 8. That being said, you get some reasonable prizes even if you're the top 64. You get like 5 chests plus, I think 150 play points, something like that. So we also get to, experiment with our new build. So let's see. We're playing against Jax. I feel like I've played against this person a bunch. But let's see what we get. All right, well, we lost the die roll, so that's not great. I actually want to keep track of how many die rolls I win and lose throughout the game. So, yeah, I think at this point I try to scout my opponent a little bit because everyone can scout everyone in this event. So sometimes I'm like, all right, let's see what he's got. So I know he generally, or they, play, kind of degenerate things. So let's see. Usual. Okay, Underground Sea doesn't exactly scream fair. They preordain, and let's see what they do. So they put 2 cards on top of their library, which not really what you want to see, but here we are. Okay, so I go, Plains Bomb, pretty standard, nothing crazy. All right. Now what are we looking at? Okay, so Underground Sea. Okay, so opponent goes ahead and ponders. Let's see what they do. So lots of cantripping. I'm pretty sure at this point, between Ponder and Preordain, that they are absolutely a combo deck. The Preordain more than the Ponder screams that. But they got to put 2 on top with the Preordain, and now we're seeing what they're doing with Ponder. They absolutely know the jig is up. I'm Death and Taxes, Yorion build. Very, very clean, very clear. Nothing crazy there. Okay, so they went ahead and did not shuffle, grabbed Tundra. At this point, based on what I've seen from them in their results, I'm thinking they are likely the 4-color Witherbloom combo. So, they could go off next turn. Because of that, I don't want to just hold up Swords to Plowshares, because, if they go Thoughtseize into something, then we lose anyway. So let's play Thalia, minimize their mana, and then I don't get in here because I think they usually run some Abrupt Decays, things like that. So it's just keep them on back. The 1 point of damage I don't think is going to make the difference. It's not like this show and tell matchup where you want every point, and the mom damage actually sometimes does add up because of Ancient Tombs. Bayou 1000% confirms, okay, this is a 4-color combo deck. This is probably what we've been expecting, the Witherbloom combo. Okay, cool. So they Thoughtseize anyway. Now, the fun fact is, they can't beat the Sanctum Prelate. If we just play Prelate on 2, he loses the game. So Swords Plowshares is at least safe. And let's see what we draw. Drew a Shot in Port. So here is actually a tough spot in the game. Do we play Stoneforge Mystic, leave up Caracas to protect Thalia, potentially get comboed out, or do we leave up Swords and do nothing with our mana? I decide that if we just do nothing with our mana, we're going to lose. So he needs to have, I believe, double Dark Ritual to actually combo off here. Plus, I think just double Dark Ritual, plus Witherbloom, and the Chain of Smog, and he's only going to 6 cards, so it's not unreasonable that he just won't have it. Unfortunately, we will see that he does, in fact, have the combo. They double Dark Ritual. The only reason to play a second one is because of this, and they have exactly enough mana to Chain of Smog us through the Thalia combo. So I'm going to let them combo us off. I want them to discard their hand so I can get a little more information about their deck. So we see Summoner's Pact, Spoils of the Vault. These are all good things to keep in mind for game 2. And then we will be back in sideboard. Okay, so here we are for sideboarding. I want Mindbreak Traps and Deafening Silences. Yes, it's a non-bow, but you just want to keep them from winning immediately, right? I consider maybe they have a sideboard juke plan, but no. So now we need to figure out what we're going to cut. I decide, Batterskull, not really a reasonable card in the matchup. We're not going to grind through. I think about Sanctum Prelate, and then I realize, oh yeah, he just can't win if it's on 2. All the 2-drops are pretty good. Swords of Plowshares, all the removal spells are actually good too, because he can't win if he plays without the Witherbloom. Not that I'm aware of. I consider taking out Retrofitter Foundry, which I consider, but I realize, what if it's a grindy game? Then we actually need the Retrofitter Foundry, but in retrospect, I probably could have trimmed a land and a Retrofitter Foundry. And we trim Flicker Wisps here because I don't think they're very good. They don't really interact meaningfully, so a few Flicker Wisps, a Stoneforge to grab Cauldra. So we have 3 Stoneforge to the left in the deck, and we trim the other 2 equipment, and we submit. So our plan is just disrupt, hold up removal spells as possible, and then hopefully Cauldra them out, or just beat them to death. So we look at the hand. Hand's great. We get to keep, Mom into free. We have free Solitude. Plus we have Recruiter. The hand's a little slow, so we're thinking about throwing it back. It's tough. It's tough because if they have the discard spell into the Witherbloom, like we don't do anything until turn 3, and we don't have our third land. So after thinking about it, we do mulligan, and this hand is just much better. It's just so much better. We bottom the Flicker Wisp because it's the thing that costs the most mana, and it's going to be the least valuable. So reveal Yorion, and let's see what we do. Do we lead with Aether Vial or Deafening Silence? And I think we lead... Well, we'll see. The reason to lead with Deafening Silence is if you think they kept on 7, they had Lotus Petal plus Dark Ritual plus Witherbloom plus Chain of Smog, then, maybe we don't lead with the Aether Vial. I decide, we need to get the Aether Vial out because we'll need to probably regardless of what happens next turn, and then we get to Deafening Silence plus potentially do something else, depending. Yeah, so they're preordaining. Very, very unlikely they can win from here. So they put 2 cards on top of their library because their preordains are just so good. They smartly play their Lotus Petal now because it plays through Deafening Silence and Thalia, which is the more likely thing that's on their mind. We keep. Ironically, we can't play double Deafening Silence because playing the first one means you can't play the second one. So at this point, I'm trying to figure out, all right, what do we do? And it's close, right? So the good news is we will be able to put either one into play through an Aether Vial next turn. But I think putting Thalia in, or actually we play the Deafening Silence, that's right. Because this way we're representing the Swords to Plowshares, and they can't combo us. Plus, some versions, I think, play some number of days, so it's very, there's no reason to play into a card that we're not sure about if we don't have to. And so now next turn, we can actually play a second Deafening Silence, plus put in a Spirit or a Thalia. Yeah. So they put 1 on bottom, 1 on top. They don't get to top all of the cards off preordain, which is great. I'm glad they got some value out of it. So we do the Vial Juke instead in case he has Stifle, even though I realize he can't Stifle. Sometimes I just like to Vial Juke because it's fun. That card is a great draw. It means that we can put one of these creatures into play and still leave up this removal spell. Plus, if they go for anything, we can Solitude and they can't force, they can't do anything. Yeah, so we play the second Deafening Silence to protect in case they have, Abrupt Decay, Assassin's Trophy, which I'm positive they will against the permanent-based combo hate deck. And so they fetch. Let's see what they do next. Okay, so this is why we actually didn't play up Thalia, because the reality of if we get them with the Spirit, yep, and I think they concede here. So they draw 0, or they draw 1, and then they have to put 2 back. Plus, Spirit is a technically faster clock, so they're down to 4 cards now. And let's see what they got. Yep. Okay, so I guess they got to put 2 cards back that they didn't want, but, it's not great. All right, so they have the Witherbloom, but we have this Solitude to protect against any potential nonsense. So they Chain of Smog, targeting themselves, and you will see quickly that the game's going to end. So when they do this, I'm okay taking a couple points of life because you want to make sure that they just discard their entire hand, and now we get to Solitude them. Yep. I don't think the opponent could have played around this. It was about as nightmarish as it could have been for them. So here we are. At this point, they concede from the game reasonably so. Because, we have a clock, and they have literally no cards in hand. Back in sideboarding, I don't think I want to make any changes. I do decide, however, to cut the 4th Flicker Wisp because I realize the card is literally just basically does nothing in the matchup. So it's like, hey, let's just get that 4th Stoneforge in. Especially on the draw, you want to be able to pressure even faster. All right, perfect. Game 3. These have been fairly quick games so far. Yeah, I mean, this seems like a totally reasonable hand. We have a Mindbreak Trap in case they go off quickly. Sometimes they can weave their way around it, but usually if they're trying to go fast, they can't necessarily. Um, Even if they have a discard spell, that means they probably don't go off super quickly, so we're okay. And it looks like, yep, here's the Thoughtseize. So they do know about the Mindbreak Trap, which, is what it is. Not much we can do there. Um, Even if they don't take the Mindbreak Trap, them knowing how to play around it is really the key here. So they unsurprisingly take the Mindbreak Trap. We draw Rishadan, which is fine. We're just going to pass the turn, pretend like we have Swords to Plowshares, plus there's not anything we can do with our mana anyway. So at this point, I'm just like, I hope I'm not dead. Which is a stance that I've gotten used to with the Death and Taxes matchups sometimes. Like, well, hope I'm not dead this game. And, great news, everyone. We're not dead. Big fan of that. So we get to play Karakas, and we're just going to play the Spirit. So we could play the Stoneforge here, but I think we are going to be using our mana every turn. And so getting a 3-1 into play that disrupts means that we, one, have a faster clock, and two, yeah, they have to use their cantrips now if they have them. Otherwise, they just get so bad. Yeah, and so this way, this turn, once again, as long as we don't die, we get to set up for a long game, which we are heavily favored in, because at this point we can recruit. If they play a thing that we want to Skyclave, we can do that, or we can recruit for a Solitude. So that means we have a piece of removal, which means they have to find another discard spell before they can combo off. It's just like exactly where you want to be. Yep, no respect. If he wants to kill it, he can kill it. There are no flash threats that I think you have to be aware of. And at this point, I'm not going to try to cut his mana here because we need to get, one, a fourth power is not irrelevant, but two, getting the Solitude is just so good because, being able to kill their guy is really relevant. And so now we're actually in a pretty good spot. They can't use their cantrips unless they kill the Spirit first. We have a free removal spell, and we're probably going to recruit again next turn for another free removal spell because this deck doesn't really have a good fair backup plan. From what I've only played against it a few times, but from what I've seen, there's no real fair backup plan, right? They have some removal, but they're not going to beat you to death with their Witherbloom, right? So at this point, Deafening Silence kind of changed the math, right? Recruit for another Solitude looks great, but maybe it's Deafening Silence plus Port or plus Stoneforge, and I think that's good, because if we Deafening Silence, it's tough, right? So if we Deafening Silence, that means they can't Thoughtseize into go off, but if they have a Abrupt Decay here, they get to Abrupt Decay the Deafening Silence on our turn, and then potentially go off on their turn. So instead, we take the safer route, which is recruit for another Solitude. Yep. And Solitude just continues to be just incredibly impressive, especially in this build of Death and Taxes. Even on my 6-card version, I play 3 and I put 2 Swords Plowshares main, 2 board, just because I think it's probably the better card, because you get to 5 mana a bunch, and also sometimes you just need free interaction. Okay, they massacre, that really sucks, but it is what it is. The good news is we have plenty to back it up. Cool, so yeah, at this point we get to play Stoneforge. Yeah, we play the Deafening Silence first. I don't think it actually makes a difference. Yep. Play out the Stoneforge. And I think I was actually supposed to play the second Karakas here because, what if they have days, right? No reason to just lose that card. We grab the 1 equipment in our deck, which actually is great because now we don't have to feel bad about pitching the Stoneforge to a Solitude. We actually just hold the Karakas up in case we need to Lotus Petal later. Cool. All right, and the good news is things are looking grim for our opponent. They do have tons of mana, so I'm super off the port plan. Okay, yeah, they can Thoughtseize. They take the Cauldron, I'm sure. Yeah, they take the Cauldron because they're absolutely losing to the Cauldron, but they're only at 7, and so we have a reasonable clock here. perfect. We found the third Caracas instead of any of the other, 30 lands in the deck. Um, but yeah. So it's interesting here. At this point, I wonder, am I supposed to just double my clock here, play another Stoneforge Mystic as a 2-mana Squire? And I think the answer is yes. Like, especially once we found the third Caracas, it's fine to just kind of throw this away. But, hold up the lands, make it look like we might have Swords of Plowshares too, right? It also doesn't change the clock, I don't believe, until next turn. So they Summoner's Pact on our turn. This does mean that they can theoretically go off with the Witherbloom if they have Dark Ritual. But that being said, Deafening Silence kind of puts a damper on that. They, of course, also have to pay for the Pact right now, which means we actually get to port their last land, which somehow our opponent with 5 lands in play made sure that our Stoneforge or our Rishadan port was relevant, which is nice to see. Cool. Yeah, so they're gonna scry again, which means we're definitely not dead this turn. Once again, very excited about not being dead this turn. Cool. Yep, so they put 2 on the bottom, which once we got a ponder where we want to be. Cool. So now we get to attack for 1, put a second Stoneforge into play, and then they're dead in 2 turns. And we get to port again. At this point, I think you just port the white source because it's the only one that is a single. And it's great next turn. If we hit another land, we actually just can Solitude, and then we can just hardcast the Solitude to certainly end the game as well. Yep. And we don't play the Stoneforge because we decide we want to keep 2 white cards in hand for the 2 Solitudes that he knows about. At this point, opponent is really on the ropes. They can't really Thought Seize much anymore because that takes 2 turns off our clock, and we have the second Solitude as backup, and it's a really tough spot for the opponent to be in. Cool. So they don't shuffle, which you don't like to see that, but they also can't do much else this turn. Like, they could play the Witherbloom if they want, and that's fine. But it's pretty risky to just put your Witherbloom out there. Okay, cool. So the good news is that this Stoneforge is another card we can easily pitch to the Solitudes. So yeah, we get to get in. Yep. They take 1, which means if they also have Thoughtseize, that this Misty Rainforest is effectively shut off. We play the Stoneforge Mystic at this point because it's totally reasonable to do so. We get to port them and leave up double Solitude. And our opponent's just in a spot where they probably have to play this Witherbloom in order to block. But if they do that, we have this Skyclave backup. Cool. Yep, so they go ahead and fetch, which, you got to do what you got to do. But it's just not looking where... Yeah, and I definitely meant to port there, but, I just clicked through. I was excited to be ahead. Moto sometimes does that. Yep, Witherbloom's in play. It's like, if they go for the combo here, then they probably die because they can't Thoughtseize, and then they know we have double Solitude. So fairly certain this game is in the bag. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, should we Solitude down? There's just no reason to, because it actually gives them 2 life. So instead, we misplayed earlier, but we might as well port now. In reality, yeah. But yeah, so now because they're at 2, okay, well now we're super duper locked in. We just play the Skyclave Apparition, and that should do the trick. Yep, so do some mental math real quick. I count to 2. It can be hard sometimes. So we play the Skyclave Apparition eats the Witherbloom, and okay, cool. So opponent, maybe they have a spell that would drain for 1. Yep, so that's what they do. But, at this point, that means they have to pay 4 mana. We also Lotus Petal Dark Rocks. I'm not sure if we caught that. There's just no route to victory for our opponent with the resources they have, especially since they also have to, 1, this Verdant Catacombs can't actually fetch, right? 2, these, he has to pay 4 mana, so he has effectively 3, 4, 5, 6 mana, so 4 of his mana is going away, both green sources are going away. So unless he rips a green source off the top, and yeah, it's just with the double Solitude and the Swords of Plowshares as well, it's literally impossible for our opponent to win, assuming I don't just, brain fart. I thought about tapping the Verdant Catacombs to send a message, but we literally didn't have to worry about tapping it because he dies if he does that. Cool. Opponent ponders just to, I don't know, see what's going on, and they give us the GGs. Well played, opponent.
All right, and we are back for round 2. Won the die roll. Perfect start. With, a reasonable hand. I'd rather not have the second Caracas, of course, but oh well. What you gonna do? We're thinking about it, though. Let me go ahead and keep. Opponent also kept. Just leave with Caracas. Honestly, we're kind of hoping our opponent wastes us here, but we'll see. Okay, Retrofitter Foundry off. Basic Forest. Not sure what's going on. But, feel like they're probably going to be playing some sort of cantrips. Might as well get the clock on the field. And thankfully we drew that plane so we can actually Apparition the Retrofitter Foundry next turn. So, certainly could be in worse spots. Okay. I would say it's a decision, but it's not really. I think we just Skyclave here, eat the Retrofitter, and then probably Stoneforge next turn and port, but plan might just be to yeah, so we cast the Stoneforge. We want to put a little extra pressure on them. Cool. All right, so Stoneforge finally resolved, which tells me my opponent either stepped away or they likely have, something going on over there. And we just play the basic planes, I would assume. Yeah, perfect. No attacks. They could have Coatl, or they could just make a 1/1 block with the Spirit. Not really the trade we're looking for. But they do have black and blue mana, so we're looking at Bug Deck, Dress Down. Sure, so that's what they were considering. I feel like they should have just done that, unless they have an Uro or something else to follow up here. Urza Saga. Okay, so of course we knew Urza Saga was in the deck because of Retrofitter Foundry, but now we see the reason that Dreadnought, the reason that they waited on the Dress Down. So the bad news, Dreadnought's in play. The good news, we have answers to it. They can't really beat Kaldra unless they play another Dress Down. But I think See, I don't hate wasting here. In retrospect, maybe we don't, though, because we're clearly aware that this is a Stifle Nod deck now. And so letting him just get a free Stifle on the Wasteland, not the best plan, but it also means that probably our Skyclave Apparition gets to eat the Dreadnought, or we get to actually put the thing on the Kaldra.
So now it's a free attack. We just get to attack for 4 points of damage. All right. Cool. So opponent's turn. Um, I'm not really loving the spot we're in, but we're also like not in a bad spot either. They can make a construct or a 1/1. Like their mana is a little tight here. Um, you know, we're probably just never sending the Skyclave or Spirit in. The good news is this Yorion's looking better and better. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah. So in retrospect, I feel like we probably should have just put the Cauldron in, gotten in for 5. Um, but I'm also considering playing very conservatively because we could still port, and I think there's basically no world where we're not putting at least a Batterskull into play. Um, we also should have let the Saga resolve, but that means they get to their main phase with the mana. It's tough. Still think I'm figuring out exactly when the best time to port a Saga that's about to sack itself is. But, live and learn. New cards, right? They're tough. Cool. Yep, so they go ahead, make the 3/3, and they will now turn into 4/4s. And we're doing this now because of the concern of obviously a Pithing Needle coming out. That would be pretty rough. So they do stifle the trigger on the Cauldron. It is what it is. We have this Yorion a couple turns from now to rebuy it, which is great. Okay, so they go to attacks. We just take the 4 here. No reason to give up our board position. Okay. Mom's not bad. We can actually... Mom can also put Yorion into our hand and put Batterskull into play. It's probably better considering all of their permanents that like literally are in play. Mom doesn't do anything against. No good attacks here, so we just pass through. An opponent doesn't know about this Batterskull, which is pretty good news. It'll probably scream we have another equipment in our hand when we don't port them on upkeep, or they might think we're misplaying, which I haven't played the cleanest since the beginning of this game, so it's not completely unreasonable to believe. Okay, so they play an Underground Sea, and now what? Okay, so they wisely go ahead and equip the Shadow Spear to a construct. Um, yeah. And here it's going to be pretty easy, like put the Batterskull in to block the one that probably doesn't trample, so they actually have to make another guy. And then I think we're just hoping our opponent doesn't have another Stifle. They've already used 2, and they haven't actually cantripped outside the dress down, so I don't think having that many Stifles is super likely. But yeah, we block the smaller construct, 2, because 1, this means they have to make a guy if they want their creature to survive, and 2, it means we gain, effectively 9 life here, because we, gain 4, and we block the entirety of the 5, but we do take 6, so we end up netting a life loss of 2 here. Okay, opponent's cracking the fetch. I don't think they have a Stifle. Like, because they probably would have just used it on the Batter Skull. And now I know they don't have a Stifle. Yeah. So now things get really interesting. So I think I'm actually supposed to attack with the Skyclave first here, as well as the Stoneforge, because they both just get in for free points of damage. But I think I'm just overthinking things at this point, and we're just jamming this Yorion with the Caracas backup. We play the extra land first because if they have, if they have days, then we're in a rough spot. But we get to add, an additional Cauldron and a Batter Skull to the board. Like, they get a 1/1, cool. And at this point, it's tough just because the Skyclave, we both want to hit the Foundry and the Shadow Spear, but considering the Shadow Spear lets them potentially kill our Cauldron, and I don't think they can basically deal with that card in any other way, we're just going to get rid of that Shadow Spear because of its text to remove indestructibility. And at this point, we are very, very far ahead. We get the Jite because it's still in our deck. We might as well. Alright, so opponents only got 3 cards in hand, so they kill the Spirit, which tells me they have cantrips in their hand. I can't imagine killing the Spirit's what they wanted to do, but, I mean, the reality is the door is closing quickly for our opponent. They can't profitably attack here because Cauldron just gets to eat something. And then we can also block with the Yorion, and then if they create another 1/1, then we get to bounce the Yorion to our hand, which we kind of want to do anyway, and then we get to replay the Yorion to blink the Skyclave, the Stoneforge. Yeah, they did shuffle their deck too, which means we're in good shape. And there we go, Urza's Saga, a card that, I'm super glad it's here right now because it's just a really powerful card. It's going to let us start getting more things, like just accruing even more advantage. We put the Jite on the Cauldron, which means we can get in with, both the Batter Skull, the Cauldron, and the Yorion, and they're going to be dead in 2 turns. They don't have a way to address the Cauldron. So now we go to sideboarding. Sideboarding is interesting because I'm not totally sure what's going on. We don't have a lot for the matchup. Peacekeeper's probably fine because they are absolutely 1,000% winning through the attack phase, which is actually something that came up a good amount in these rounds today, where Peacekeeper is just reasonable to bring in because if you can control who can attack, who can't, you can blink it out with Yorion, of course. You're just in a much better spot. Now we're trying to figure out what to cut. I think Athalia is probably fine to cut here. I think the Stoneforges are great. I think the Spirits are great. Mom's obviously great, as are all the removal spells. And Sanctum Prelate hitting 2 to hit like Abrupt Decay, potential Assassin's Trophies, and Dress Downs are just... It's a very powerful spot to be. Okay, so we reveal Yorion. We look at our hand, and it's not great, but it is reasonable. And against a deck that's going to try to attrition us out, I don't hate it because we do have plenty of lands. We have Aether Vial, which they kind of have to stop as well, just because it can generate a ton of mana throughout the game. I am tempted to Wasteland here, but the fact that they can just stifle it and move on, probably not where we want to be. We didn't see any dazes in Game 1, and I do believe there were some spots they may have been able to leverage it, and so we just jam. Also, if they do daze there, then we're pretty happy because then we're ahead on lands. We can start porting when they're a land behind, and then follow it up with Wasteland. So we're very happy regardless of what they do. Okay, so they Brainstorm. Okay. Now we go to their turn, and what do we see happen? Urza's Saga. It's a good start from our opponent. And Needle on Aether Vial. That's obnoxious for sure. We have a lot of draws in our deck that get rid of it, but still pretty obnoxious because, there's that. But the good news is, joke's on our opponent because we don't have any creatures in our hand, so Aether Vial doesn't do anything anyway. All right. And at this point, I think we just like porting the tropical island because it's very unlikely that they actually have any sort of ancient tomb effect, so they can saga. It is possible that it was correct to hit the Urza Saga because they can't really use generic mana very often, but turns out it doesn't matter because they just have Dress Down. Just using it as a cantrip. And I guess if they do have a land, then they can follow it up with a Dreadnought here, which would be very good. This opponent fetches. And we also have the Dreadnought, so like, okay, max punished here. But the good news is we do have this Swords of Plowshares. Like, we'll give them 12 life, but we're not dead, and not being dead, it's kind of my mantra. It's like, well, I'm not dead. We got a chance. Tick up, because I think we're assuming at a certain point we are just going to kill the Needle with hopefully a Skyclave Apparition. Yeah, so at this point, we Swords of Plowshares. We're kind of forced into it. And then the question is, do we waste, port, what? And I think wasting the Trop is fine because their mana is in a not a great spot. It was probably correct to hit the Urza Saga, just because, getting a Retrofitter Foundry is a problem. If they have another, I guess they can't Dress Down. So it's close. But yeah, Retrofitter Foundry, and now they get to make a guy anyway. But they're actually Life from the Loam. So, okay. Yeah, it's like, all right, cool. So this is clearly a very different deck than we played against game one. This feels more just like a bug mid-range control deck, which is less exciting, but also fine. Yeah, so play the Caracas. Then we just get to port the Forest, probably. We can port, or we can play out the Thalia. But yeah, I like this line a lot better. And we're thinking, all right, what do we want to do? It is unfortunate that the lands we have drawn have all effectively been like more plains and things like that. Whereas like we could really use a wasteland, a port, any of our non-basics would be excellent here. So like a Saga would be awesome too. Yep. Okay, so we're back to my turn. And what do we got? Okay, Stoneforge is a good pickup here for sure. And if we play the Stoneforge, then it's very likely that we want to play the Thalia first, because then they cannot stifle the Stoneforge, which is exactly the line we took. It's also not unreasonable, I think, to Rishadan port again, but I don't think it's worth it because they're likely to just use all their mana on making a construct. So at this point, we get the Cauldron complete. Their mana is a little taxed. If they want to make a construct, then they have to use all their mana, and then this Stoneforge actually just gets to put the Cauldron into play. Yeah, and so the other upside to them playing Life from Loam is we do get to see a good portion of their deck because they're just going to dredge over pieces of it. It's like now we know, okay, there's a Grist in here. We know there are Fatal Pushes now for sure. I expected to see some normal Fatal Push, but these bug decks, there's always an interesting mix of removal spells. So... Okay, so they're able to Abrupt Decay the Stoneforge because of the extra mana from Urza Saga. They grabbed Shadow Spear, which, okay, things are not the best that I would hope for, and so we need to start drawing some spells. Yeah, no reason to leave it on 4. We don't have the jailer. Perfect. So we see, planes number 5. We did start with 3. Like we knew that land heavy hands would be a reality with this configuration. We attack with the Thalia because there's no reason not to. They'll just block and sack, I'm sure, but you just kind of got to get there. Peacekeeper is not where we want to be right now, but we do get to put this Yorion in our hand, and Yorion's the Sky Noodle is a big one. I don't know if Yorion's a dude. Yeah. And so it's interesting. We're definitely porting here because opponent is taxed on mana. The question is, could we have waited a turn to put Yorion into our hand so that way we protect this Thalia from a potential removal spell? But the needle, the fact that they drew their one of needle to deal with the Aether Vial is obnoxious. It definitely would have allowed us to change some of these lines. We would have been able to put this Yorion into play. So yeah, I'm taking one. It's fine. Cool. And we get to always know, so we get some value here in terms of time. And the way these games are playing out, I'm much more inclined to believe that we may go to time. Yeah, no reason to attack because, well, actually was reason to attack, right? Because we can attack with the Thalia. They can't untap and block. So yeah, I definitely should have attacked there. We did give up 2 points of damage, but we also Swords the Dreadnought, so the race is probably not our line. We're trying to win this long game. Unfortunately, they do have Retrofitter Foundry. We haven't found a Recruiter or a Skyclave Apparition, and our opponent has found Dark Blast, which, oof, this is a problem. Yeah, so they get to Dark Blast, our Thalia. So yeah, this game is clearly starting to slip away. Okay. So they made another Thopter, and keep in mind, since they do have 3 mana up, they are able to untap the Retrofitter Foundry and then turn a Thopter into a 4/4. So they did put Dark Blast into their hand. They're attacking with their 1/1 flyer. We can't block it. And now we're kind of pricing to leaving this Karakas up to protect the Thalia, which, it's not really the spot we want to be. Perfect. I'm glad we were able to find another Aether Vial. Okay, and we're not going to Swords because there's no real reason. Yeah, that being said, we do probably need 2 Swords once they turn this thing into a 4/4 because that's too big. Can't be having that. But we do want to wait till they equip the Shadow Spear because if they do that, they're not casting Force of Will any easier than they were. Yeah. All right. So we put Thalia back into our hand, as it makes sense to do. One thing to note, we also should have ported earlier in the turn. Yeah, so they're loaming again. We decide, yeah, I don't think there's a reason to port now. We could port in their end step, which is fine. Yeah, like they're just accruing so much advantage out of this Life from the Loam, Urza's Saga plan. So yeah, now that they haven't equipped the Shadow Spear, we're just gonna Swords. And once again, like we should be porting in their attack step. Okay, so we did do the second best thing we could do with the port this turn. Okay, and so this way they actually have to, yeah, just make a guy. Perfect. All right. All right. Skyclave apparition. Be a great time for you to show up. Unfortunately, not going to happen. And the fact that they have, yeah, it's just we're in a really tough spot, right? At this point, we decide, all right, time to just jam this Cauldra. We can't really block effectively because they can kind of get around it. So we're just gonna get in there. It is unfortunate they have the Shadow Spear, so that way if they do have something like, Assassin's Trophy, they can get rid of the Cauldra. But I'm not taking this turn to play my 7-mana thing, especially since Dark Blast kills Mom and Orthalia. So. Yep. Perfect. And they have another Urza Saga. Of course they do, because they are Life from the Loaming at this point. Um, it's at this point in the game where I'm considering conceding, just to save some time, because knowing what I know, this game might go longer than anticipated. So they're dressing down. I'm expecting them to follow up with either an Uro or a Dreadnought. Yep. I mean, the good news is, even if they use the Shadow Spear's ability to remove the Dreadnought, the Caldra's abilities, or its indestructibility, its first strike Exile Touch does the trick against the Dreadnought. So this just means we can't attack with the Germ because we absolutely have to block 1000%. The problem is, here's Plains number 6. Not really what we're wanting here. Would have loved to see like an Urza Saga or literally any other land or a spell. I would take any non-Aether Vial spell, I guess. At this point, we get a little greedy here, but I feel like we almost have to. So we blink out the Cauldra. Yep. And we'll bring it back. Yep. You get a construct. Same song and dance as always. It's just a casual 7/7 though, so it's not too bad. And they've made a 4/4. They've now added 10 power to the board. This is just like not the best spot to be. We've just been savagely outvalued in this game, which usually is not a problem. So we're tapping down the Saga here with 1 counter, so that way at least they only make 1 construct instead of 2 this turn. The problem is they just get to loam this one back again, or they can just get their Dark Blast back. Yeah. So it's just a really bad spot to be in. They get another 1-mana thing. If they have any, I'd be surprised to see any. No, so they don't. They don't find something. So at least I know they're not getting anything else out of their deck. Honestly, I think they were supposed to get another Dreadnought there and just sack a construct and a construct. The 4/4 and the 8/8. And just put a 12/12 into play. And I think they're realizing they don't actually have good attacks here because Cauldra is completely absurd. Because we can just block the Dreadnought with the Cauldra and then block the 4/4 construct with the Yorion. Yeah, so they don't have any good attacks. That being said, okay. So opponents still thinking about what they're going to attack with. All right. Yeah, okay, so they send them all in. Block there, like we talked about. We will shrink the construct down to an 8/8 before damage, which is great. And then this other construct dies, so we took 8, but we were able to get 2 bodies off the board. And we're not dead, technically. They can make, they probably just make another servo here. Solitude's a good one. I think we're kind of forced to just jam the Solitude. But yeah, might as well get in the free attack with the Yorion, or not. Yeah, so we're leaving up Solitude as an ambush Viper, basically. You know, it's not a terrible spot we're in, all things considered. Like it's pretty bad, but yeah. So we yeah port same thing as last time. The Saga that has one, so they only get one construct, not two. Now it's tough, right? Because we want to leave up this protection for Yorion, but I feel like if they had something that could kill Yorion, i.e., Assassin's Trophy, they would have already activated Shadow Spear and then killed the Cauldron complete. I don't think you let that thing stick around if you can help it. Yeah. All right. So same as before. We're not going to evoke. We're just going to hard mode cast this. Then we eat. Yeah, one of the constructs. Doesn't actually make a difference, but you pick the one with the lower power. I, for whatever reason, decided it was a good idea to give them extra power. And now we get to go to blocks. We know they don't have Dark Blast in their hand. I, for some reason, thought that the servos were Thopters, which is why I did not block with the Solitude. Otherwise, I absolutely would have, and we would have gained one more life because they would have just sacked the one that Solitude was blocking. They also would have been down one more artifact. So it kind of feels like we're almost coming back here. But it's just such a tough spot. And Torpor Orb, like, what a beating. What a beating. And if they were at a lower life total, I could totally see us, maybe getting there with the Cauldra, like moving the Cauldra around, but not being able to blink things is so tough. So we choose to attack with the Yorion here. I think at this point you just play out all your cards. Yeah, I mean he doesn't have the any removal spells up right now, so we can put the Yorion into our hand. We decided to move the Cauldra to Solitude, which I don't know if that's the plan here. Sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background. So as you can see, this is a long game of matching. At this point, I'm very unlikely to win this game, but opponent is playing a very grindy deck. So the question of do we leverage the clock advantage we have comes up. And in a league, I probably wouldn't, but in a showcase, like the expectation is you can manage your clock effectively. And so I can see us potentially getting there on time if we can, keep them from dreadnoughting us out. But we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, so Shadow Spear has been activated, which means they probably found a removal spell for Cauldra, which at this point, this game is like very much over. So I'm definitely vying for the clock here, because they do have to win game 3 as well, and they're down, 2 minutes. I'm like, all right, how much time can we knock off the opponent's clock here? Yeah. The reality is, however, that like we're dead in this attack, so not much more time. Yeah, because even if I guess if we had blocked, we could have lived one more turn because the Solitude still has the lifelink. But Surgical Extraction, I realize, is much better because they're playing all those dredge spells and things like that. So playing against a deck you've never played against it can be challenging with Death and Taxes. I don't think the Peacekeeper is actually that good anymore because they do have a ton of ways to remove it. Skyclave's obviously very good. I think trimming a Thalia here is fine since the game will likely go very long. But yeah, that's kind of all we got. So I do decide to end up keeping the Peacekeeper for Thalia because we have started vying for this the clock game as well. So reveal Yorion, of course. This hand's quite good. We got 2-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop removal spell if we need it. Yeah. And all these 2-drops and 3-drops are quite good. Like, so funnily enough, this would be a good matchup for Kataki, even though we have our own Retrofitter Foundry. But they use it much better with Life from the Loam. So it is a consideration to keep a Kataki in the sideboard anyway, just for the really heavy artifact decks. I don't know what I'd trim, maybe a Leyline, something like that. But that being said, they can also just Dark Blast the Kataki regardless. Yep. All right. Yeah. So I decided to get the Spirit in there. 1, because it's a faster clock, but 2, because I would rather they use a removal spell on the Spirit to unlock their cantrips rather than turning off the Stoneforge. That being said, because I know they're a Stifle deck, it is also totally reasonable to play the Stoneforge out instead when they're tapped out, so I know they can't stifle it. Yeah, so this screams to me they probably have a dress down, but we're going to have to get through these things anyway. Yeah. So at this point, it's a question of, do we do nothing? Do we play Recruiter? Do we play Stoneforge? Do we play Wasteland? I think playing the Recruiter is fine here. They're clearly going to dress down. That's like absolutely evident. But it's a question of which is more important, the Stoneforge or the Recruiter. Also, using 3 mana this turn seems much better than 2 mana, because now if we do get another 2-drop, we can double spell. They do unfortunately still draw 1 card because Spirit of Labyrinth's a white card, and so it can't be as good as Leovold or Hull Breacher, which are blue cards. That's just how it works. That's why my sign is no good cards allowed except Thalia. And I guess I have to change it now to no good cards except Urza's Saga and Thalia. Okay. Yeah, attack with everything. If they have endurance, I'm fine with that. Like we aren't doing anything by not attacking here. Yeah, so Stoneforge Mystic. They have another one. Of course they do. Why wouldn't they? Yeah. The good news is Flicker Wisp can rebuy all these effects. So even though, it's obnoxious, for sure, it's not game over, and we are getting bodies into play, so we can start beating down. They're only at 11, and we have 5 power in play. Okay, so Life from the Loam, sure. So I'm excessively glad that I'm not on the Wasteland plan now. Having played the matchup more, I do think probably you want to keep the Thalias. I don't think the Peacekeeper is good enough with the dredging, and I think they will eventually find an answer to the Peacekeeper. So I think you can probably just trim either one Thalia or, some other card for the 1 surgical that you're bringing in. I don't think you want to cut any 3s. The Flicker Wisp's great. The Recruiter's great. The Stoneforge is great. But yeah, so at this point we just get in for 2 damage, and then let's Flicker Wisp. Yeah, Flicker Wisp is great for 2 reasons. 1, it forces them to have yet another stifle, but 2, it also just is more power in play, right? So they actually force of will, which I don't think we had seen a force of will the entire last two games. So I was pretty surprised. I was pretty convinced that they did not have counter magic in their deck. But you know, playing against a deck you haven't played against, these bug decks are kind of all just piles of cards anyway. This one just happens to have a stifle theme in it. So it's hard to play optimally against a list that you just like really don't know much about. Grist, yep, that card's obnoxious for sure. The 1/1s are lining up obnoxiously well here. Okay. I mean, it's not the best turn to see Aether Vial, but yeah. One thing to note is an Urza Saga at any point in any of these games would have been excellent. It would have absolutely been just nuts. I'm trying to figure out which one to attack. I think I was supposed to attack Grist here, because we do want to keep that loyalty a little low, just because we don't want him to have multiple, bone shard effects. Which we do. We do go for the Grist, keep him to 3, so that way he can't neg 2 twice in a row in case he does have more things. Put the Yorion into our hand and play the Aether Vial. Why not? And like the good news is, Yorion and Solitude, both very good. I feel like they have Stifle. The opponent's down to, sub 5 minutes now. They don't have a whole lot going on. They're only at 6 life. Like, this is going to be a close game. Like, they absolutely could grind us out, but it seems challenging to do so. Something of note is if we had Thalia, it would be much more challenging because these Life from the Limbs cost 3 mana. But we will see. It's also unfortunate that opponent now has 5 mana up plus the fetch land. And we always yield here because we're just going to go right up the chain. There's no question about, oh, am I going to stop at any point? So surgical extraction is interesting. So it's a question of what do we hit, right? So we could hit this Force of Will to make sure all our spells resolve. We could hit the Life from Loam because it's obnoxious. That being said, it's tough, right? So we don't want we don't want a surgical Life from the Loam yet, because also if they have like a brainstorm, then they just brainstorm in response to it and dredge it. Interestingly, another good target for surgical extraction. Yeah, so now it's Force of Will, Dark Blast, or Life from the Loam. And like the reality is if they have Brainstorm, we're probably dead anyway. So I'm probably supposed to take this Dark Blast here just because it's going to mess up combat math for the rest of the game. It means all my X1s are just stone dead. All these things. So we let them dredge the Dark Blast here. And kind of need to see what's going on. In retrospect, I definitely feel like I should have surgical the Dark Blast, but now there are 2 Life from the Limbs in there too. Yeah, so we're just gonna play this Solitude here. Hope it does things. So this is the other reason it would have been great to hit the Dark Blast, because now Solitude cannot block these insects. So if I had thought about Solitude having 2 toughness, I probably would have just surgical the Dark Blast instead. And this is a really bad spot because we definitely want the Yorion to blink both of these creatures, because that's a really good way to actually get back in the game. Sure, they have Shadow Spear. Like, that's not the card I'm scared about here. It might change my decision on what equipment to get. Now Jite is looking better for sure. Opponent has also drawn 3 of their dress downs in the top half of their deck with 2 ponders. So it's, yeah. So at this point, we need this Yorion to resolve. So we choose to hit the Force of Will. Unfortunately, it's not great, right? So they have 0. And in fact, they have a Stifle in their hand, a Force of Vigor in their hand, and the Dark Blast that we knew about. So we take this opportunity to sniff their deck, as you should do. on Magic Online. Yeah, so we take the one Force of Will that's in their deck out. We're at this point tanking really hard on what on earth to do. How do we proceed? And it's a question of, do we jam this Yorion? I also learn a lesson the hard way here, which you will see in just a moment. Yeah, so attack everything at Grist. There was a consideration to actually bring in Leyline for game 3. I don't think it's correct. Like, if we had Rest in Peace, I'd be about that, but the fact that the game is going to go so much longer means that we're going to draw ley lines, and that's not where we want to be at all. Yeah, so I figure, okay, we'll play Yorion. He'll, stifle the ability, and we'll move on with our day. But it is okay. Cool. So we don't do that. Interesting. I think at this point I was probably supposed to Wasteland as well, because like we have more than enough mana. We have Yorion, and if we can get him to blow a stifle on the Wasteland, then the Yorion actually does a lot more good. Yep, so we get Uro back here, which is super obnoxious. This deck is just super resilient. I'm honestly really impressed with it. Like, the more I've seen it, the more I'm just like, okay, it can grind super well. The dress downs actually work really well against Death and Taxes, unsurprisingly. But I like them a lot more in a deck like this than against something like Bant, because Bant has no way to like really pressure you or leverage the dress down to make like things like Dreadnought and Uro come in like just here for 1 and 3 mana. And yeah, so drawing the Croc is actually not bad, right? Because it means we actually have coverage from this Uro. But yeah. So the problem is, yeah, so we should have attacked first, for sure. The problem here is that I did not realize, and this just hasn't come up, right, because we don't play in paper, and I haven't been playing Yorion Taxes that much. Played, 4 or 5 leagues, but this has not come up. You can stifle the returns trigger, and so if I had known that, I would have selected nothing. But, that's a mistake you make exactly once. And we definitely want to keep the Yorion alive, so we protect with Caracas. They use the stifle, so we're okay-ish. We can block the Shadow Spirit creature. Okay, well, they minused on the Yorion, which, cool. All right, well, the good news is Yorion's alive. The bad news is now they just get to put this Uro into play. I'm pretty sure that's what they do here. They just keep generating more and more value. Yeah, the Uro. So, could be worse. They only have 3 power outside the Uro. So it's a question of how do we proceed. And if I had had more time, if I hadn't taken so long on the surgical and looking at their deck list, I probably could have sussed out, like, the plan was actually just like, take your time. Urza Saga is actually really good here. We have a chance. So we play the Saga. And then the real thing we should have done is, because we have the Caracas, we just Caracas the Uro back to their hand. But we didn't, so now our Yorion is in danger from the Grist. And if Yorion dies, it's really our only source of advantage here. I think we were also definitely supposed to tap the Saga there, but like I said, I'm down to the 2-minute mark. I'm playing as quickly as possible, trying to leverage. Yeah, I did this as a gut reaction. I know you can't respond to Sudden Edict. It was very unfortunate that they drew Sudden Edict there, but they probably could have killed Yorion one way or another, because we can't really let this Uro hit us. Yeah. So the good news is we get to bounce Uro. The bad news is we had to bounce Uro. Yeah, and that's the other problem. They got to Force of Vigor. The Aether Vial obviously wasn't doing much, and it's at this point that this game is over. The opponent actually has enough power in play to kill us over the course of a couple turns, um, and there's just not much to be done. We're porting. We're like, all right, let's try to use that clock. um, but the writing is pretty much on the wall at this point. Yeah, they drew another Urza Saga, and at this point they could also start like Life from Loaming. I like that they didn't though because they respect the clock as well. They're just like, I want this game over. My opponent's hell bent, and I absolutely agree with the opponent's decision here. Yeah, and so the clear decision here. Yeah, I like wasting the Saga. The clear decision, obviously, we flicker a token here. It takes power off the board. We're supposed to just hit the token that's suited up. I even think about it, and then I was like, all right, well, what if we instead picked the most meaningless permanent on the board? Yeah, okay, cool. Dark Blast. He has a Dark Blast too. He has 40 cards into his deck, so it's not completely unreasonable, but it is a beating. And so if we had hit the insect, then we only get hit for 4 here, right? Yeah, 4 instead of 5, and that is the difference between us being dead or not. An opponent takes us down with less than a minute left on their clock. So this was a long, grindy game. It was, I think, the longest game I played all day. So we went down 1-2 versus Bug Stifle Knot. Cool, and of course we were the last ones to finish. So I will see you in, round 3. Cool. So round 3, after losing a tough one in a really drawn out fight. Look at our hand. We're on the play. And I mean, this is a totally reasonable hand. We have Aether Vial, we have Caracas as a play against a lot of decks. We have Rashaden Port as a way to tap things down. Like, I think this is a pretty easy keep. Yeah. So we keep it. Play Aether Vial and pass the turn because that's how we do. Okay, Tundra. So I'm thinking this is Bant. It's definitely getting Prismatic Ending. I know that. Cool. All right, yeah. So I'm thinking it's Bant. It could be a Miracles, like a more classic Miracles variant. But Bant is the most likely thing on my radar anyway. Actual Tundra, probably not what Bant usually leads with. They usually lead with basics, but, could be a weird hand. We've seen Prismatic Ending in Tundra. It's likely that it could be the Jeskai Stoneblade deck as well with Monkey, so Monkey Blade. But at this point, I know restricting their mana is the best thing I can do anyway. So we just port. And then, yeah, of course, the next turns will be decided by what we do. So they play an island and pass. And we're just gonna port down their Tundra again. If their mana is a little rough, like I'm fine with this game going long. The Bant matchup, I'm very happy to see, which is such a strange thing to say for a quote-unquote creature deck. Yeah, so they ponder. Cool. So yeah, they ponder, and they did not shuffle. Then they drew the Flooded Strand, which tells me, okay, they definitely want to just keep drawing lands. So we're just going to play the Caracas. And at this point, I'm thinking, maybe we play the Recruiter of the Guard. I left the Rashaden Port up in case they go back to basics. I think the Caracas is the better land to keep up anyway, so we probably just, I was just clicking through trying to make the decisions fast, because I know sometimes this match does just go down to time by the nature of the match, and now we're doing the what I refer to as the recruiter dance. So you recruit for a recruiter. That way, if they terminate you at any point, you can just keep rebuying, right? Just like, you just bury them in recruiters, because then they have to use their mana. They have to use like their Swords to Plowshares on your 1/1 that demonic tutored for a demonic tutor. And I only execute the strategy against, okay, something like Miracles. So now I'm thinking this is actually blue-white Miracles. They might be splashing another color, but actual blue-white Miracles. So he's Snapcastering for a Ponder. Yeah. This is another reason I kind of wish I had left up the white, because then we could just really cleanly Swords of Snapcaster untap with 5 mana. But, live and learn. Yep, so they did shuffle their deck, which we love to see, and they did hit their land. So we know they're splashing red at least. We don't quite know what for, but, that's fine. Yeah, so we're just going to Swords of Snapcaster because we don't want them to be able to turn a Snapcaster Mage into a Ponder plus a removal spell. So yeah, just, all right, start a tagging for 1, chip away. If we thought the last game was going to go long and we're like, oh, well, maybe we'll face a faster deck this round, we will not. Yeah, so it's going to play out the Mom. Mom, we're getting to a point where they have to start doing things. Okay, so red, so I'm like, okay, well, maybe they have Bolt. They have Gut Shot. These people have been hurt. I think a monkey got them at some point. And it's tough out there for a creature with 1 toughness. My God. Yeah, so we are, all right, cool. Gut Shot in the main deck. In the main deck, people. And then I realized, I did lose last round, so we are in the 1-1 bracket. But yeah, all right, time to get in there, little soldier. Hey, opponent will lose the game if they take, this 20 more times. All right, let's play another recruiter. What we get? Cool. Yeah, I just assume my opponent has nothing this entire game because they've kind of acted like it. And so we're just going to keep doing the recruiter dance, and we'll play this Aether Vial, and now we can start porting while generating mana off the Aether Vial. And now we're getting to a much better spot in the game. Yeah, we don't care about keeping this Caracas up at this point. I choose hitting the second white source instead of the second red source because I don't think they do anything with the second red. But the second white, they could have, Terminus. Obviously, that's not important. This turn, just as a general philosophy, they could be playing Entreat the Angels, right? Like, that is a card that I would not be terribly surprised to see out of them. They could also be playing actual Supreme Verdict. So by hitting the white source, it's going to be another turn unless they have another white source. And of course they do, but that was my thought process behind hitting the second white instead of the red. Yeah, and so we're just going to go up the chain with this Aether Vial. Cool. So now we have doubled our clock. Okay, we've doubled our clock. This is kind of the perfect turn to put Yorion into our hand as well, because then we get to port and leave up the Caracas, I believe, if I did my math right. Yeah, this is absolutely the turn to just put Yorion into our hand. And it's these kind of games where Yorion like really shines, right? Where it's even if all of my creatures die, and it's just a 4/5 that I can keep vialing in and protecting with Caracas, that is very good because it's a free card, right? Like, it was a card I had to do not that much to put in my deck because the entire deck is 4/ofs. But yeah, so it's these kind of matchups where Yorion just really shines. Okay, so go ahead and fetch. All right, what we got? Red, white, blue. So I'm thinking Teferi, maybe a Prismatic Ending. Monastery Mentor. That is not a card I had on my radar. The good news is we have 2 different answers to it, and one of those answers we can rebuy in case it gets stifled or something like that. Yep. Cool. Yep, so they are Prismatic Ending, the Aether Vial, which makes sense to me. And so we're going to take this opportunity to just Swords the Mentor now. I'm going to do this 1,000%. I don't think they're playing Spell Pierce. Daze is certainly not a card this deck is playing. And so it's just like, let's do it. See if you got the Force of Will. And they have another Gut Shot. A second Gut Shot. like, at this point, I'm just like, you know what? This is probably a 4-gut-shot deck. These monkeys have probably stolen prismatic endings and monastery mentors from this poor person. Um, it's probably like a very Bruce Wayne-esque story where their parents were killed by monkeys. Um, Bragavan, man, you are just. I never thought I'd see main deck gut shot out of a deck like this. Yeah, so we Yorion here because they're tapped out. I don't think they have the Force Will. They do, but that's fine, right? I'm obviously not like ecstatic about it, but notice there they couldn't Force Will anything else because they had to keep the Force of Will in their hand to stop the Yorion from coming down. Because like if they don't, they lose the game, right? I get to Demonic Tutor again. I can protect it. It's too much value, and so they had to 2-for-1 themselves off of the card that I got for free out of the sideboard, and that's something that normal Death and Taxes just doesn't get to do. And so even though I am one of those big believers that consistency is great, obviously I'm Mr. Four of over here, but like the Yorion's value in grinding is you really cannot quantify it as any other card. It's just like Lurrus in Modern, right? Can't talk about Lurrus in Legacy anymore because no Lurrus is allowed here, which probably for the best. Cool. All right, yeah. Well, let's attack. See if they have a Snapcaster or something else. They only have 2 cards in hand, so unless they have exactly like Force of Will, I'm okay with it. And the joke is the Skyclave Apparition is actually big enough to just be a 2/2 that can block these monks. What is it, Grey Ogre? Yeah. Yeah, and so recruit for a Stoneforge here because at this point I just kind of want to get the pressure going. We can go grab a Cauldron very freely because we can actually just easily hardcast this thing. Yeah, I was tempted to get the GT for a minute just so I can kill off the tokens, but you just get the Cauldron, especially since we've seen red. It's totally reasonable to believe they have a Shatter effect in their main deck. Like I don't think Wear Tear is unreasonable in this meta. It kills Urza's Saga on the front side, and then most decks have some artifacts. And you can always shuffle it away with Brainstorm because that card is like cheating. It's so good. I'm sure no one watching this has ever heard that Brainstorm's a really good card, but for those of you who choose to just trust the top of your deck, like let me tell you, Brainstorm is it's a heck of a drug. Okay, so they found another mentor. That's pretty good. Cool, but we have the Solitude now too. But I think at this point all roads are kind of leading to Rome, right? Like we're ahead on cards against our opponent. Solitude's coming down. Yeah, and at this point there's like, oh cool, I don't have the answer, this game's over, which of course it is. Yeah, so sideboarding, I think we bring in literal 0 cards. We might bring in a Surgical Extraction. And I don't know if it's this match, but Cage is actually insane in this deck now. Of course, I talked about in the deck because you can Urza's Saga for it. So you shut off their Snapcasters. Against Uro decks, you shut off their Uros without actually having to use a card to do it. Your land just turned into the piece that means Uro can't come out. So Surgical Extraction's fine here. It's not great. But yeah, Cage is better, and I think I realized, oh yeah, we can just tutor for it. Even if they kill the Cage, right? It's fine because we didn't have to use a card to get it. With my luck, of course, I'll just naturally draw it and play it. But Surgical is just not quite as good against Miracles as it used to be. I used to run like board in maybe 1 or 2, because if you hit their Swords Plowshares, it actually did do a lot of damage. But now that they also have, Prismatic Ending, it just does a lot less good. We board out a Caracas here, which, so maybe it's, so I'm trying to figure out what to board out, and trying to think if it should be a land or whatever. It's possible it's supposed to be an Aether Vial, but, I'm not sold on that. So, yeah. Cool. We are in game 2, match 3, and all right, we have Urza's Saga. This is going to be a long game. I'm very happy with this. If it was a 1 land and it was Urza's Saga, I would not keep this. But this is one of those matches where Urza Saga going to get, a Aether Vial is actually very good because your Aether Vials are fine coming down on turn 3, 4, 5 against this matchup because the game's probably gonna go to turn 10, 11, 12. So the more I've seen Urza Saga and the subtle power of it in Death and Taxes, obviously in many decks it's just like overtly powerful. In Death and Taxes it's a little more subtle, less obvious, and so I was a lot less. I was a lot more reticent to try it. But the more I've seen it, the more I'm like, this is just really good. Because even if we just hit another land, we don't have to deploy any other threats to the board, and we just get to go make a construct, put in a retrofit or foundry or Aether Vial. And that's like, then they have to Terminus basically just what my land got. Okay, so they Prismatic Ending the Mom, as they should. This makes sense. Yeah, and so, yeah, we play out the Stoneforge here. Let's go get a Cauldra, right? Because we have the Jite in our hand already. Yeah. And there it's also possible we were supposed to just Urza Saga into Thalia and then follow that up by making a construct, then making a construct. But I think it's pretty close. I think I was concerned about getting to those higher mana numbers. Like I said, this was the first event that I played for Urza Saga. I played 2 in one league prior to this. Went like, it was either 4-1 or 3-2 because I punted. But it felt very good. I wanted more lands in the deck anyway, because this deck is like probably the most mana hungry deck I've ever played in my entire life. And yeah, so like some of the more subtle lines I wasn't as, comfortable with. But live and learn. That's how you do it. Okay, he has Mentor. Luckily we have this actual free removal spell, and it's actually even better because, yeah, no reason to do it now. So I definitely, this is a little greedy, right? Because if we don't play the Thalia first, then they can force. So like if we had played Thalia here and then Solituded, it's fine that we, don't get the Cauldra activation in. But yeah, I mean, we could have just played out the Saga, played the Thalia, and then Solituded, and we'd be in a much better spot. Cool. Either way, we're in like a pretty good spot here, right? Because we have Cauldra, we have Stoneforge. Stoneforge is basically like pay 2 mana, put this free card into your hand, into play, lava axe your opponent, catch. Yep. So they ponder, and what do? They did not shuffle, which that's not what you want to see. You always want to see the shuffle. Also, sometimes you don't, because that means your opponent's really good. So they Snapcaster. They're probably going to Prismatic Ending this Germ, because taking 5 a few turns in a row is not really a tenable option. But it's at this point I realize that even though the Germ is dead off the Cauldra sitting in play actually just starts pumping my constructs, right? So it's actually totally fine. I do think I was probably supposed to play a Plains here, just in case they do back to basics, but I'm like actually very happy if they start back to basicsing, right? But yeah. Yep, so opponent brainstorms. Play out Scalding Tarn. Alright. Yeah, can't attack because we can make a 2-2 construct. Everything's great. And now, like, I can do things with my mana, but what if we just, made a couple dudes here? Yeah, so now we have 2 4/4s off this land, and I think about getting the Cage to shut off future Snapcaster mages. But Aether Vial is very good, especially since we have things to do with our lands like every turn now. I was definitely supposed to play this Retrofitter Foundry beforehand as well. So he's thrown that Snapcaster under the bus, cashing it in. So at this point, I feel like I was probably supposed to, like at this point, you probably just put the GT into play instead. But yeah, so your Terminuses. But like, look what the opponent actually got rid of. He got rid of the Stoneforge Mystic, which got me the Cauldron into play, and he got rid of 2 constructs, which came from a land. It's yeah, like he had to Terminus, obviously, right? Because we had like we were gonna have 12 power or something stupid in play, and so not questioning their play, but just really focusing on the power level of Urza Saga in this deck. It's really bewildering how much this card overperformed in this deck specifically today. I wish I had drawn it more. Yep. And so we're just leaving up 2 mana to play the Retrofitter activation game, of course. Like, now they also have to answer this Retrofitter Foundry because it's just going to start making a cascade of dudes. Anyone who's played against Retrofitter Foundries, usually in ninjas, it's not great, right? You're just like, oh man, this is problematic, but the card's just really good. In any match that goes, longer than turn 4 or 5. Cool. All right. Make a 1/1. Yeah, so now we have 4 power in play, right? I guess it's not an unreasonable spot to be. I'm surprised to see Mishra's Bauble in the deck, but it's a Terminus trick, apparently. So I was more surprised to see Gutshot. Let's put it that way. So at this point, yeah, I don't actually like the line of playing the Recruiter. I like the line of, probably just either attacking for 4 or just attacking with the servo. And then I can turn the servo into a Thopter, and then I can untap the Retrofitter Foundry and turn it into a construct in the same turn. So once you have the servo in play, it's only 4 mana to make it into a 4/4. Attacking with the servo is totally free. If they Snapcaster, that's fine. We're trading a card that was nothing for an actual card. Because we just don't want this Spirit of Labyrinth ambushed. And they brainstorm with my active Spirit, and I think that was probably a misplay, or a punt, misclick, whatever. And they, of course, concede the game there. So we are 2-1. See you in the next round. All right. There we go. So we are back for round 4. Lost the die roll, unfortunately. But we are 2-1. That'd be hard to be 2-3 right now. And let's see what we're playing against. Yeah, so totally reasonable hand. We've got interaction pieces. We have a really good hate bear for any like spell-based deck. So we're covered on both the fair and the unfair front. The only thing that the hand is missing is Aether Vial, because you want that in literally every hand. But we are facing down with the Demon Barber. Sometimes it's hard to talk. Okay. So they mulligan to 6. It's great news for us. Yeah, all right, let's see what's happening. Okay. I was happy to see that it's probably not elves. Anytime I see any sort of basic force, I'm like, well, this was fun. This was fun while it lasted. And so, as much as I want to play the Aether Vial, I think it's way too important to just Swords to Plowshares, any Elvish Reclaimers or Neither Reliquaries on site. And I didn't want to 2-for-1 myself with Solitude when the game might go long enough where I can just cast the Solitude. So we have Sylvan Library. Our hand lines up very well against their hand. Our 1-drop answered their 1-drop, and our 2-drop answers their 2-drop. You can't ask for much more. The only downside is we have not been able to deploy our Aether Vial, but keeping all their cards from doing things is a pretty fair price to pay. We also have a ton of basic lands, which is great news in this matchup because that way they can't potentially waste chain us out, which is definitely a way I have lost this matchup. So, okay, Dryad Arbor. All right. And so we definitely need to keep the spirit in play. We want to attack. But it's tough because we also need to get this Dryad Arbor out of here. Basically, anytime we can kill a mana source, I'm down to do it. Yeah. So the question is, are we Aether Vialing? Are we Swords of Plowsharing? Are we Thaliing? And so we can take a turn off to basically do nothing, right? Because next turn we can potentially we're going to play the Sanctum Prelate next turn, naming one because it shuts off their crop rotations and their Swords of Plowshares, leaving us with basically the only removal spells left in the game, and that is, Solitude and Skyclave Apparition. And if you name one with Sanctum Prelate, it's very hard for them to actually kill any of your creatures. If they can't kill our creatures, then we're in great shape. They might have Prismatic Ending in their deck, but that's fine. Well, opponent's a big jerk who wants to bounce our Thalia. And so, poor Thalia, not going to get to attack. The good news is if we hit a land, we can swords if they bounce the Thalia. They didn't, but that would be a line available to us. Ha! Now we can bounce our own Thalia in response to send a message. So we attack with the Thalia here to bait the bounce. And then when they bounce it, we go, okay, we get to now Swords of Plowshares and play the Sanctum Prelate. Oh, okay. Interesting. I choose to do this instead. I think the line that I'm talking about now is better, but I don't know why I took that line. Yeah, I think that was just a really bad misclick. Yep. Fair enough. I mean, now I guess we get to Swords this Dryad Arbor regardless. But now they can crop rotate too. So, yeah. Looking back, you get to, look at your own misplays and learn from them. I think the one thing I really need to get better about in Magic Online, Magic in general is slowing down a little bit, but Magic Online specifically slowing down the mechanics of it, because a lot of times, especially later in the tournament, you might see me click through things or just make a decision really quickly. But yeah, so definitely correct. Opponent's probably like, oh my god, even the Dryad Arbor, the poor Dryad Arbor. Yes, nothing lives. Everything dies. Yeah. Cool. So Dryad Arbor gets exiled. It's our turn again. Opponent's not doing anything with their mana, which I'm happy with, but at the same time, they are not wasting the Caracas, which is interesting to me. They're probably saving it for a Wasteland. We get to freely attack in here because they don't have Flash Rats other than Endurance, and Wasteland, Forest, Flagstones does not cast Endurance. Yes, we're actually just going to keep the Thalia in our hand because at this point it is evoke fodder for the Solitude. And this is actually a really good chance for us to put the Yorion into our hand or play the Sanctum Prelate. And we choose the Prelate. Yeah. We are covered from a Merit Lage, even if somehow they make one here. So we're not worried about that either. The Flicker Wisp on Vile next turn really also just makes me feel like we're in a really good spot this game. Yep, so they crop rotation now. And what do they get? Yep, so they got the plains off of the Flagstones. Fun little trick you can do in the green-white lands deck to turn your crop rotation into a rampant growth for 1 mana at instant speed and counter a wasteland sometimes. Not that they're ever wastelanding your Caracas or your Flagstones, but cool. So I will choose 1. Yep. And now I'm feeling really good because so they can make a basic forest, but they can't 20/20 us this turn, which means they won't attack us until at least the next turn cycle, and we are completely fine with that because we also might just hit a land, and then we can just put this Solitude into play, or we can yeah, just cast Solitude. And then Flicker Wisp it to eat another thing. So they're setting up for the combo, it looks like. But not being able to crop rotation means it's unlikely that they will succeed in doing so, because I don't know the sequence of draws they could have that would let them do it. This is definitely the turn to just get a free 5 points and then probably put Yorion into our hand. And then for the next couple turns, tick it up to 5, and then start putting in Solitude and Yorion. And we have Vile the Flicker Wisp this turn if, yeah, it's just opponent's in a really bad spot. And so, yeah, the Sylvan Library was 2 mana, discard this card from your hand, proceeds to do nothing else for the rest of the game. And I get that, they could have the removal spell for the Spirit, but that's part of the reason we played the Sanctum Prelate. Cool. So Ramanop Excavator, it's obnoxious for sure, and we want that off the field because that's a way that they can get back into the game quite easily. And so we take this time to, because Thalia is not doing anything for us the game, right? She's dead weight, but she is, as the blue players like to say, pitchable to force. So we get to, during the second main, we get to Solitude the Ramanop Excavator, and then Flicker Wisp it out of the Aether Vial to rebuy it. So we add 6 power to the board, we get to eat the Ramanop Excavator, and then we get to start cracking in for 11. And we get this Thalia out of our hand. It also means that the attack will put us above 20, so even if somehow, I can't think of the combination of cards they could have right now, even if somehow that, they made a 20-20, we would be at 23, we'd take 20, go to 3, and then they would actually, I think, just die on the crackback anyway. So, yeah. So, yeah, we always put the removal spell trigger first, and then the evoke. Just good habit to have. I think about linking the snow-covered forest, and I'm like, what am I doing? Your Solitude's about to die. Yeah. Yeah, and so now we also have them on a 2-turn clock. We have, 11 power in play? Yeah, so even if they gain 5, it's a 2-turn clock. Yeah, take this up to 4, because starting next turn, we will also be able to flash in this Yorion. Yeah, bash in with everybody. I'm not here to not attack with all the things. I mean, some games I am, but this is not one of them. Yeah, and we're also 1 mana away from just hard casting Yorion. An opponent, I think, should see the writing on the wall here, but we will see. Yeah. All right, cool. So, got game 1 versus Green-White Depths. And now that we know what we're playing against, we can basically bring almost nothing in. Peacekeeper is actually quite good here, right? Because their removal spells are super taxed. They can't generally Prismatic Ending for 3. And then they, I like Containment Priest a lot because it shuts off their Green Sun Zeniths. If they have Dryad Arbor, they can't play it, or Green Sun for it. I like the Peacekeeper, obviously, because they have to attack to win. And then the Surgical Extraction is nice because you can just completely shut out the Merit Lage option forever. In retrospect, should have put the Grafdigger's Cage in the deck, too, because, we can Urza's Saga for it. And so I'd be fine probably cutting, probably a Umezawa's Jite or a Stoneforge from the deck for it. I think that'd be fine. Yeah, because Retrofitter Foundry is actually great too, because that means their steps don't actually let the Merit Lage get through if you get to that spot in the game. So you can just keep making flying blockers and then block with Mother of Runes. So that's a new angle that I didn't used to have access to in the not regular D&T, definitely not regular D&T, but not Yorion stock D&T either. And that's just because Urza's Saga is a really dumb Magic card. It sounds incredibly medium, and it's already a mulligan to 6 with the Cauldra, so easy mull here. Yeah, so mull. The sand is just much better. We get to throw the GT on the bottom. And so yeah, we have a removal spell for a Reclaimer,
And then we have a Stoneforge to follow up. And then we have a Flicker Wisp as a removal spell for something later in the game. We also have a Recruiter that can go get, Skyclave Apparition, Solitude, any of those. But generally against Green-White Depths, I lost, I think, the first time I played against the deck, and I realized, you just keep any hand that can answer a Reclaimer, and you usually win from there. So opponent did also, I think, 1, 2, 3. No, so they did not mulligan. Yeah, so we easily swords Plowshares, and so now if we hit a third land in our 35 land deck, we're in incredibly good shape because now we can also just like Skyclave more things, especially when they do play something like Skyclave and they don't have like a Life from the Loam to follow it up. I don't even know if Life from the Loam's stock. I don't think it is. They just like you start eating their lands, right? And eating Mox Diamonds is extra delicious because they don't even get a creature from it. So I think about taking the Jite because they are very likely to kill the Stoneforge, and we can always flicker the Stoneforge if we get the opportunity. But here we are, and looks like opponent's gonna kill this thing. That's what it smells like. It smells like a dead Stoneforge Mystic to me. Yeah, there you go. She's dead. It's okay. But yeah, so the fact that both decks have usually a good chunk of removal post-board is definitely a reason to grab the Jite, especially since I don't even have a third land in hand, never mind my 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th. But yeah, if we can hit a third land here, we're obviously in insane shape. If they don't press any advantage here, we're also in fine shape. So it really depends on what our opponent does. Alright, is it Sylvan Library or Xena? So it's probably another one of those stupid Reclaimers. Yep. Okay, what we got? Not really what we wanted, but at least we get to play this Jite. And now we have 1,000,000 Flicker Wisps. So we have 1,000,000 answers to Merit Lage. That's cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so they're going to fetch. Something to keep in mind is it's very easy for them to get those extra lands. All right, cool. So they're going to Rec Sage the Jite. This is fine. Like we want this fair game plan happening because if they aren't 2020ing us out really quickly, they're probably losing. And even if they do 2020 us out because of the nature of our deck, like we're in great shape. So yeah, he didn't get any activations with the Reclaimer, so we're just going to take that as a win, eat the Reclaimer. I would love to eat the Mox Diamond, but hitting the Reclaimer I think is just too important. And I don't think them having one more mana this turn matters. Like I don't think they're going to Questing Beast us. And if they do, we just, flicker out the Skyclave, eat another one. Yeah. No opponent. I will take 2. I'm fine with that. And then what do we got? Cool. So yeah, we have 1,000,000,000 removal spells in our hand. So we get to attack for a free 2 points of damage here. We just get to blink this Skyclave Apparition multiple times. Okay, so he endurances. Luckily, we have this totally free removal spell. So I don't think he tucks any graveyard. Nope. Yeah, so we're just going to pitch one of the 3 Flicker Wisps in our hand, or the Recruiter. Because the Recruiter is the non-redundant piece, that's why we come to that decision. Pretty easy. Our Skyclave gets to get in, and then we also get to eat their Mox Diamond this turn. It's everything I could have hoped for out of this turn. The fact that we also got to get another card out of their hand is really big. Because, yes, I know we 2-for-1 ourselves, but this Recruiter is going to let us recoup that advantage for sure. And if we draw a couple more lands, this Yorion is literally just going to slam the door shut. Yep. Eat your land. And if you can tax their mana, which usually not super easy to do, but if you can, their deck just doesn't work. The reason they run so many lands is because they need a lot of lands. People don't just run lands because it's fun. Yeah. I think about blocking. It's not unreasonable, but I think keeping a blocker for a potential Merit Lage is just, much better. Cool. So we just get to attack for a 5 free points here. Also keep in mind, like, yeah, they hit us for 2, but we just get to crack back for 5. They can't really block. Yeah, so we play a recruiter. We probably just go get a solitude here, because when you're ahead, usually the only thing that bad that can happen is if they solitude you. So if they play, a Merit Lage somehow end of turn, then we can safely solitude it, and we're in good shape. Like, that's the only way we're losing this game, right? Is if they cheese us out with a surprise Merit Lage exactly this turn, because now we get to untap. We can Flicker Wisp the Skyclave on anything they play, or we can Flicker Wisp the Recruiter to go get another Solitude, and then if we keep hitting lands, we can actually just get to the point where we're casting Solitudes. So getting the extra ones isn't even bad. They realize they can't attack, and so... I mean, Containment Priest isn't my favorite draw here, but if they play Green Sun Zenith, I'll be happy to have it. And then we can use Flicker Wisp as a removal spell on their creatures. So yeah, we're just gonna play the slow control game here. We're totally fine waiting, but I think we're gonna actually play out this Recruiter or Flicker Wisp as well. Okay, cool. Yep. Yeah, which makes sense. Opponent can't just take 3 a bunch. So yeah, I think we just flicker out the Recruiter to probably go get another Flicker Wisp. The circa Oko meta before that, where you would just flicker your Recruiter to get another Recruiter or another Flicker Wisp, and just build an army that way. Yep, there we go. And if I wasn't the aggressor here, I would consider getting a Peacekeeper maybe, but we just don't need it at all. We get to attack. We get to continue attacking for 3s. So they're effectively at a 5-turn clock. And then we will get to Flicker Wisp again to recruit for probably another Solitude. Okay, so we've hit our 4th land, and I don't think we're even going to waste here. We just attack for 3. Pretty like simple lines here, like nothing too crazy. I'm tempted to waste, but this is actually probably the best turn to put Yorion into our hand. Yeah, so we leave up the Wasteland because this is a good way to break up a Merit Lage if they happen to get one. And now if we hit our 5th land and we just get to Yorion, we also end the game because we get to eat another permanent of theirs with Skyclave Apparition. We get to blink out the Recruiter probably, and the Recruiter comes back and we Demonic Tutor, and then when it comes back the next turn from the Flicker Wisp, we get to Demonic Tutor it again. But we didn't do that. We just drew Aether Vial. So we'll just, keep doing our thing, attack for 3. And this, I think, is the way you want to play this deck. A lot of people, especially like newer players to the deck, play very aggressively. And sometimes that's absolutely the line. Like sometimes you're like, all right, Mama to Stoneforge, Cauldron you, you're dead. But oftentimes the correct line is seal up every crack that could get you. And yes, opponents like not drawing particularly well here, but I don't think it would matter if they were drawing well. Because if they copy the stage, we waste it. Or they copy the depths, we waste it, and then we can Solitude if need be, and if they, have a Sajiri step Sajiri step to protect it as well, then we can Flicker Wisp it out, right? Like, we're in good shape here. Okay, cool. They killed our creature. Like, could I have finished the game earlier? Absolutely. If I had gone Containment Priest, Flicker Wisp your guy out, move on with my day. Yeah. And so Retrofitter Foundry is great too, because it means that I can have colorless blockers now, right? Which is very challenging for them to deal with, which is why I'm actually going to cast this now. Like, I'm forcing them to 1-turn combo me every turn through a Wasteland, and then I also have protective measures beyond that. And since we have, a 3-power flyer in the air, and they can't effectively attack on the ground, they're kind of stuck. Now they certainly can't attack on the ground. Before they could offer the trade of the Rex Age for the Recruiter, which I wouldn't have taken, but then we just crack back for, 5. So that race just does not favor them. And anytime you're in a holding pattern with your creatures where you're the no attack team and the no block team, surprisingly, it's not where you want to be. So this game is actually moving along at a really good pace. I haven't had to skip any dead air, really. So yeah, we'll see me just, make a 1/1. Just leaving up this wasteland the whole time. Yeah, we could play the Spirit. I don't think most decisions matter at this point. We definitely want to kill the Reclaimer, so I think that's what happens. I think we just Flicker Spout the Skyclave to eat the Reclaimer and call it a day. And we actually still have the ability to, so if they wasteland the wasteland, we get to either wasteland their Thespian stage or make the servo into a Thopter blocker, so that we have a blocker on top of the Solitude. But yeah, so they got nothing back for blinking, us losing the Mox under the Skyclave, and they got their Elvish Reclaimer eaten as well. Skyclave Apparition did a lot to change these kind of matchups. Yeah, and so opponent now has realized the game is over and the match. Cool. So I will see y'all in round, 5? Cool. All right, awesome. So we are back for round 5. We lost the die roll. We reveal Yorion, and I think at this point I'm looking up my opponent. And if I remember correctly, they are on Sneak and Show, or a variant of Sneak and Show, and so this hand, certainly not going to do it. I would probably throw this hand back anyway, but yeah, this hand's probably not going to do it. On the draw, maybe on the play. On the play, I'd probably keep this hand because we had to go Stoneforge into Cauldra into Sanctum Prelate, and so like you have lines there that can win, but not on the draw. On the draw, you need like a Hate Bear on 2. And this is better, but, in retrospect, I'm probably supposed to throw the GT back, which is kind of funny. Yep, okay, so it's lining up so far. Sneak and Show, Sneak and Show. Cool. Look at my sideboard, see what I can board in next round, or next game. So they did not shuffle. They drew off the Ponder. Second Stoneforge, super not what we want to see. And this is just not really going according to plan here. Cool. So they brainstorm here. And what we got? Cool. So brainstorm resolved eventually. Played Flooded Strand, cracked the Flooded Strand, and what else are we doing? So they're grabbing more basics, I would assume. Yep, okay, well, it's certainly looking like Sneak and Show, and 1000% Sneak and Show. Preordain. Yeah, the Preordain is a giveaway that it's a combo deck, and Volcanic is a giveaway, kind of, that combo deck is likely Sneak and Show accompanied with Basic Island. And third Stoneforge, not really what we want to see. It's like, come on, man, I play 80 cards, so I can just see like 1 to 2 copies of everything. So he actually forces the Thalia, which tells me he's either short on lands, or they like just don't have a lot going on. So I'm back to the, well, hope I'm not dead plan. Okay, well, he's brainstorming, so we're on cantrip number 3. Okay. And what do we got? Cool. So nothing. All right, well, we got 3 of these, so we might as well start jamming them. It is unfortunate that the lands we've drawn has also all been basic, but, do what we can. Yeah, so at this point I was like, well, hope my opponent gets unlucky. We get Cauldra because, it's a combo deck. We want to pressure them. Yeah, all right. And then we've got nothing else. No attacks with the Squire yet.
Might see him in a couple turns, though. All right. It is opponent's turn again. They have chosen to fetch. And what are we getting? Probably a basic island. Or a Valk would not be insane either, since you already have a Valk. And I'm probably not going to double wasteland you next turn. Yep. So we get the second Valk. And am I getting Sneak Showed? Brainstorm. Okay, so probably not. So, yeah, this is opponent's 5th cantrip. They've seen almost half their cantrips. My guess is, so it's looking like they just don't have one half of the AB combo. So either they don't have Sneak Attack / Show and Tell, or they don't have Gristlebrand, Embercool, and or Omniscience, depending on the certain combination. Or maybe they have just a bunch of sneak attacks and they can only find Omniscience. Okay, so we are up to what, cantrip 6, and assuming they're playing 4/4/4, they have now used half their cantrips. So yeah, this is a thing that does happen. You just kind of hope you're lucky, and you move on from there. Okay, they did shuffle. They passed it back, and I'm like, all right, well, I guess we keep doing the thing, and Skyclave, if they show and tell, we can put the Skyclave in potentially, but right now we're just jamming this Cauldron. And in retrospect, we definitely should have played the other Stoneforge first, because some lists do play days. Yeah, all right, crack in. And at this point, I'm actually trying to just amass enough permanents to where one Emrakul hit leaves me with a real clock. Because if they're having trouble finding one part of the combo, if you can survive that first hit from the sneak attack, assuming it's an Emrakul, then you can usually still win. So now if they show and tell, right? So we have 4 non-lands and 4 lands. We only have to sacrifice 6 permanents, so we can put in the Batterskull that adds 2 more permanents. So we can sack both Stoneforges and all our lands, right? And then we attack for 9, and that's a real thing. We might do it differently, but I mean, that's kind of what I'm aiming towards at this point. The other consideration is if they don't have another mana source and they show and tell, putting in the Skyclave to potentially hit a sneak attack, right? Because if they have Lotus Petal, they probably would have played it by now. Okay, well, I guess we jam with Germ and 1 Stoneforge. Yeah, I'm thinking, is there a reason to not jam with both? The reason is we can put the Batterskull in and then also put the Skyclave into play, and that leaves us in pretty good shape. Yeah, and the question is, do you play another 2-drop this turn? And I don't think you do. Yeah, so because they're on a 1-turn clock. We can put Yorion into our hand. I don't think this is correct if I do it, but putting Yorion onto the battlefield is pretty sweet too. Because you can just blink all your stuff off of their show and tell. You just blink your Cauldron, your Stoneforge, and then they attack, and you take 1 million damage. But you then come back with lethal damage, and so that's the consideration I'm making here. Okay, so they're down to 5 now, so Cauldron by itself is lethal. Yeah, so they have cast 7 cantrips. The fact that they have not found the combo kind of bewilders me, but at this point they might not have they may have found the combo, but not a combo that's good enough to kind of stop what's going on. Okay,
show and tell. And so this is an interesting spot. Not totally sure what to put in. We put in Skyclave Apparition out of concern that it is exactly sneak attack. That was not the case. That being said, we still have a lethal attack here because Kaldra has first strike. So they have to block the Kaldra. Gristlebrand gets exiled without dealing any damage, and then we hit them for 4 damage. And so it's not technically lethal, but Gristlebrand doesn't stop anything. And because I don't want them to have another turn, I know if I just attack with the Germ, they'll block the Germ. But if we attack with everything, they might block something else, thinking that they'll gain life. Yeah. And so, luckily, Sneak and Show players generally are not, like, usually keywords on creatures versus Sneak and Show are not relevant things. In this case, First Strike was incredibly relevant because my opponent died before they could gain life. So, yeah. Sometimes you have a bad hand, but your opponent's hand is worse. And, they probably had like 4 cantrips, and they thought it would get there. Okay, cool. So we have 4 deafening sounds coming in. I think you bring in the Mindbreak Traps too, because it stops them from going too ham. You bring in the Peacekeeper and the Containment Priest, of course. The Surgical Extraction, because that way if they are playing Intuition, or if you can manage to get through that first show and tell, I think the Surgical is worth it, because I think you have enough bad cards in the matchup. I could totally be wrong, but that's my take on things. Like, 1 Surgical is fine. But yeah. Mindbreak Trap. Yeah. It's got to be better than cards like Swords to Plowshares. Skyclave Apparition. So some of this boarding I'm not sure about. Skyclave Apparition, not great. I'm pretty sure I was supposed to got Retrofitter Foundry here too. Probably some number of Mother of Runes. But I like Mother of Runes a lot more with Peacekeeper, so it's hard to say. I think you can definitely cut the Batterskull, the Jite, and like 1 to 2 Stoneforge Mystics as a starting point, and all 4 swords. So that would be 8 cards right there, and then we can probably trim like the Retrofitter Foundry. But let's see what we do. So the Jite, Batterskull, cool. I absolutely agree with Past Self. It's like, no, don't let last game convince you that having just more permanence is the important piece. As much as I like Stoneforge with the Kaldra, I think getting like all these cards is really important. And I think trimming one Skyclave. We wanted to get the 3rd Stoneforge in. I think I was supposed to keep the extra Skyclaves and instead board out the Retrofitter Foundry. Yeah, that seems right. Because I don't think you want 4 Stoneforge. I think 3 probably. So we trim 1 Stoneforge and the Retrofitter Foundry so you have 3 Skyclaves. I think that's probably correct. Cool. All right, so Yorion. And yeah, this hand's pretty good. It's not like the best hand in the world, obviously, but Spirit's a really good card in the matchup. And we have Recruiter to go get, Containment Priest or Solitude. Right. So we have lots of lines here. I'd love to see a Deafening Silence, but you can't always have that in your 80-card deck. Okay, so we found a 3rd land too, which I'm pretty happy about. We play out Mom, pass the turn. Opponent is in the tank on what land to fetch. Okay. Volcanic Island, Lotus Petal. Well, this is not my favorite thing. Yeah. Okay. I think I was supposed to put in Spirit here. I think I was absolutely supposed to put in Spirit. Um, Recruiter. Okay, so the good news is we can go get a Emmerich or a Solitude here. But you know, this is what it is. Yep. Okay, so this kind of sucks. Yeah, so this is why we were probably supposed to get the Spirit, right? Because if they put in Omniscience, then we stop all their cantrips. So they have to also have exactly Emrakul in their hand for it to matter. They also are able to daze the Solitude, which what a beating. Yeah, but if we had put Spirit in here, we do take 7, but they can't draw cards, and then they're kind of on empty. So then we can actually recruit for something. Obviously, they have the days, but we're just in a much better spot. All right, yeah, we look pretty dead. I feel pretty super duper dead. Yeah, sack the Gristlebrand. Yeah, get out of here, Gristlebrand. All you did was draw, a bunch of cards and then hit me for 7. You don't get to stay around. Yeah, opponent even has to discard 7 cards. So they actually drew 14 cards out. Which, based on what happened last game with their cantrips, maybe we get there. But based on the first couple of turns of this game, I don't think it's incredibly likely. Yeah. Let's see what they discard. So they discarded Show and Tell, Island, Ancient Tomb, Brainstorm, Preordained. So this means their hand is pretty stacked. And so if they have like an Emrakul here, we're super duper dead. They also have the Force of Will for the Spirit, so they probably just have another Gristlebrand, would be my guess. I attack with the Mom because at this point I'm like, whatever. If they've got it, they've got it. And Yorion's hanging out, like we can get there, right? Clearly Sneak and Show should play Yorion, so that way they can blink their Emrakul and their Gristlebrand that they put into play. And they get to stick around. 80 card Sneak and Show. You heard it here first. Don't let Englescu tell you otherwise. I'm the true Sneak and Show master. Okay, yeah, cool. This does explain why they, they forced the Spirit, but unfortunately they have this Emrakul, probably. Yep. I wonder if they're... Spoiler, I think we'd lose this game. But I think they Show and Tell in an Omni. Now just cast the Ponder, and they use that. Yep, so I guess they still don't have an Emrakul. I'm like, all right, so you're saying there's a shot. They shuffled. Uh, uh. All right, they crack their Lotus Petal to Brainstorm, which this game has been wild. This whole match has been wild. I'm just like, I have no idea what my opponent kept, but here we are. I can't believe they haven't found an Emrakul. I don't understand anything that's happening, but they get to attack for another 7. I am shocked if they don't have an Emrakul next turn, or even a Gristlebrand does it at this point. If we can find a Karakas and they don't have another red source somehow, then I guess there's that. But it's looking real bleak for the good guys here. Okay, so they discard Sneak Attack, Ancient Doom, Brainstorm, which, if they didn't find another creature and we can hit this Valk. You know, there's a thing that exists.
All right. So, opponent, we're going to port, and what happens? They have a dude. Well, there we go. And it's the best dude. It's the big sky spaghetti monster. And so now we get to go to game 3. All right. So, what happens in game 3? Game 3, we realize, oh yeah, Skyclave stops Sneak and Show, and they're clearly a heavy Sneak and Show deck because we saw at least 3 of them. But what do we cut? We could cut moms, right? Like, maybe we put those out. I think in retrospect, like I talked about, you can cut the Retrofitter Foundry since the game's not coming down to that. You can cut the Retrofitter Foundry. You can cut another Stoneforge Mystic. That way you can keep at least like 3 Skyclaves. And I don't think you want the full 4, but here we are. All right. So yeah, I mean, this is certainly a keep. Kind of wish the Retrofitter Foundry were, something else, but it's fine. It gets to play here. Okay. So yeah, Retrofitter Foundry on 1. Opponent's like, I don't know why Retrofitter Foundry's in their deck, and I agree with them, but here we are. Okay. Opponent fetches. Ponder. Seems good. Okay. So Ponder resolves. They don't shuffle. They play Lotus Petal. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, opponent likely is going off next turn. I want to see what's going on. So honestly, the surgical extraction here is much more about getting information than it is, cutting a corner. And I think knowing exactly what my opponent's game plan here is actually like a really, really strong line. And we actually get a Ponder out of the hand. So they have Ponder, Ancient Tomb, Bristlebrands, Scalding Tarn, Show and Tell, and Sneak Attack. And I'm snipping it, as you always should do. And I'm trying to figure out how to progress the game. I'm going to go ahead and skip through this. So since they didn't have a Daze or anything like that, we jammed the Spirit. We wanted to play around Daze because we knew they had it from the last game. Cool. So they draw a mystery card. So, yeah, they drew their mystery card, and we know their hand is Ancient Tomb, Sneak Attack, Show and Tell, and Scalding Tarn. They play the Scalding Tarn. So they have 2 mystery cards. Go. There you go, and play a Wasteland here. Attack for 3. Put him to 16. We recruit here. And we recruit for... We're thinking about Peacekeeper because they probably just can't stone beat Peacekeeper because I think, if I remember correctly, they basically just have a Braid as a removal spell in their deck. And since they can't cantrip, that's one thing. But Containment Priest is going to be a similar thing, right? Like, Containment Priest we can also put in more quickly. But let's see what happens. Okay, so they play Ancient Tomb. I know they have Sneak Attack and Show and Tell. And 3 mystery cards, I guess?
So they play Sneak Attack. So there are 4 cards in their hand. We know Show and Tell. Yeah. So we can absolutely attack here. Or they had the Gristlebrand to it, right? So we know about the Gristlebrand. So at this point, we grab an Aether Vial with the Urza Saga trigger. After the floating the mana, we then Containment Priest. We know their hand is Gristlebrand, Show and Tell. And they found a Force of Will. So they pitched the Show and Tell with the Force of Will to hit the Containment Priest. And so we attack in. Yep, we attack in. I point out the Lotus Petal because I'm like, yep, they can absolutely put the Gristlebrand in here. They can draw 1 card off of it for 7 life if they really want to. Of course, they get that 7 life back, but still. Yep, so we're just going to do this. Gristlebrand's gone. So they have 1 mystery card in hand. And there we go. So 1 mystery card. They draw 1 card in response, which they probably had to, but just gaining 7 seems a little bit better to me. But so they take 4. I decide to take the line of blow up their only red source. They have exactly 2 cards in hand now. So they need like a very specific combination of cards to beat me. And what happens? So they have a Valk. And is it Gristlebrand? No, it is Emrakul. And so they hit red source Emrakul naturally off the top, which, yeah, that was rough. We also had exactly 6 permanents, so it's over there. Over the next couple turns, it does not go well. They sack it, putting everything back in. They only have 1 card in their hand, so if we get a couple good draws, we're back in it. Peacekeeper, not good enough, unfortunately. So we pass back, they pass back to us. We play Urza Saga. I was like, you know what? Worst case scenario, this does turn into potentially an Aether Vial off the next turn. So, there's that. It's not terrible. Then a couple turns later, we can hit Athalia. Unfortunately, I can't play Magus of the Moon, which blows up our land. It's also a 2-turn clock. So it's not looking great because we can't both draw. We can draw like Solitude to buy another turn. We do not. So we are likely just dead here. It was a sad way to experience this, considering how far ahead we looked. I was pretty happy with our position, but sometimes the sneak attack player draws, casts 7 cantrips games 1 and can't really combo off, and then sometimes you lose this way. But this is it for now. I'll go ahead and post this as part 1, and then I'll post part 2, which is the last 3 rounds, in a separate video. Thanks for watching.